Well, Dave, we're here at Academy Sports and Outdoors, Rigs and Techniques at the CCA workbench. And Dave, as you know, Poons,
You love this tarpon. You know, he's the Silver King, and he was crowned the king because of, you know, his aerial maneuvers, his size, and his stubbornness. You know, he's a really hard fish to catch. It was, for the longest time, it was not how many tarpon you caught, it was how many tarpon you jumped, because you don't catch all the ones you jump, that's for sure. But we're going to talk tonight about using artificial baits for tarpon, because we've talked in the past many times about what kind of baits to use and how to use the baits, but never really talked about using hard plastics and flies and stuff. So we're going to talk about that tonight. So, you know, when you're out fishing with a lure, what's your first step you make as far as the lure goes? Or
That's a good question. You know, first thing, Dave, is you got to consider, if you're going to be throwing a lure, one, you got to be able to hook the fish. So that means you got to have a rod like this Ricky Red rod, the heavy action. It's a 7 foot. We also make it a 7.5 foot. The key is that I've got a lot of backbone here that when I actually hook the fish, I can really fight the fish. It's got a light enough tip so that it'll throw this Rapala long cast a long way.
Right.
We load it up with the 832 suffix. It's got a, what is this? What does that say?
That's a Komodo. SS.
Yeah.
That's a big, it's a big reel.
So the Komodo, I got 2 size Komodos I use, but the key is that, you know, we fish at all times of the year.
Right.
You know, we get fish that get in shallow water during the winter time, in January and February. Those fish have a tendency to gravitate to some real dark colored bottom in the Florida Everglades. And with that being said, you have to adjust the way you think throwing lures versus if you were fishing at a bridge this time of year in the Florida Keys.
Right.
You know? So obviously in tannic colored water, we throw a lot of chartreuses. We throw jointed lures, which they swim very shallow.
So they can see them very easily.
They see them very easily. But then we also will adjust as those fish move into deeper haunts as they're staging for their migration, whether it's a bridge, it's a river system. What we'll have a tendency to do, and my favorite color is just like the Stu App tarpon fly, which is orange and gold. This seems to be a great color, chartreuses.
Yeah.
You can throw them with the single hooks in the new Coastal
I was about to
series.
ask you, because a lot of guys use a circle hook on their baits now, because once they get in there, they're not coming off. And this is the big craze now, is putting circle hooks on your lures. I mean, single hooks on your lures. Is that paying off as tarpon as well?
The inline hooks work very well. The thing that I like is that the fish will sometimes hit the lure, but then because it doesn't have the treble hooks, you might miss him, but when you finally do get a chance to hook him, the lure seems to stay in a lot better with the single hooks, and certainly a lot more friendly at the boat.
Right.
The thing that you got to remember too, Dave, is as the migrations kind of slow down, we also have a variety of lot of smaller fish. So you're going to adjust your size. You can go to a twitching mullet like this one in the pilchard color, single hooks again. This lure, I find, if I just throw it out and just reel it back and let it just do its vibrating thing, sometimes I even hold the rod tip up so that I can make a V wake on the surface. I get lots of bites fishing that.
I was about to ask you, do you alternate your speed from fast to slow for different times of the year or different situations?
Well, certainly when they get away from the spawning part and the worm hatches, then you do adjust. As the mullet come down, you might change to a different shape. They like silhouettes, you know. So twitching versus just reeling, that really just depends on what the bait are doing at the time. Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about the food that you'd use for fly fishing. This Scientific Angler box is a box that I use.
It's beautiful.
You know, Dave, and the cool part about this is that we have flies that have weighted eyes like this chartreuse toad.
Right.
I use that on the ocean a lot of times when the current is high around a bridge. The palello worm hatch is what all the fish migrate to the bridges for. This is what a little palello worm would look like. and we simply double hand strip this. We don't want it to stop. It's just a skimming along the surface using.
So that worm, you're actually moving that worm pretty good. Huh?
But 2-hand strips so that the worm doesn't stop. It just skates across the surface.
I gotcha.
And then obviously we have some stuff weighted that we use in high current, dark water. We call this dredging with a sinking line. You're anchoring the boat and you're throwing in the current 90 degrees and letting it sweep. That's how we fish around the bridges. But realistically,
so you don't even have to see them in that instance.
we just burn through 5 minutes of
I
time,
gotcha.
and the fun sucker's in my ear saying, "We gotta go!"
All righty, man.
All right, but
I tell you what, that's a lot of chartreuse in there. I know what I'm gonna throw.
Brighter the sky, the brighter the fly. Remember
There
that,
you go.
fellas.
I will.
Brighter the sky,
The brighter the fly.
brighter the fly.